It is so good to have you along this morning, the Doug Wright Show, here at KSL News Radio. We are broadcasting our program this morning from the Sheraton Hotel in downtown Salt Lake City. And we're honored to be sharing this this broadcast with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Let's just let our listeners know how many of our cities and towns are represented today. We've got people from throughout the state of Utah. And it's fun to be in such great company today. I want to thank the League. I also want to thank Zions Bank for helping to facilitate this debate and this broadcast today, and we are honored to be here. It is a great honor for me to introduce two fine gentlemen from our state, the current governor of the state of Utah, Governor Gary Herbert. And we're honored to have General Peter Cook with us today, candidate for governor of the state. General Cook.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlemen, we haven't flipped the coin. I was able to scrounge up a dime out of my pocket, which is somewhat of a miracle. Usually I'm borrowing a dime. So I'm going to toss it, and Governor, let's give you the call on this.
Heads.
Heads. I have to look over and see. And we have tails, which means that General Cook will get the first word in our debate and the last word on the debate. We'd like to open today with opening statements from our candidates, and we'll make this a 2-minute open. And we look forward to hearing from you first, General Cook.
Hello, Doug. Leagues of Cities and Towns, my fellow Utahns, thank you for inviting me to talk about the issues impacting our state. I am running because the governor's current economic development program, I feel, needs to take another direction and has to have new leadership. And here are the facts. These are brutal facts. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the most trusted agency for collecting job numbers, Utah has lost 93,000 jobs. Our wages are falling the 7th fastest in the nation. Utah workers made $1,147 less in 2011 than they did in 2010. And some of our rural communities have unemployment rate as high as 12%. And 5.7% of Utahns have completely dropped out of the labor force because they can't find jobs. That's the worst decline in the nation by a full point. Utah has plunged this year from 2nd to 10th in terms of job creation. 1 in 7 of all Utah households face food insecurity, while poverty among Utah children has increased 45% in the last 5 years. I have the leadership, I have a vision to turn our economy around from the bottom up. And that partnership starts with you in the local governments. We need to invest in small business, and we need to promote entrepreneurship. That's where I come from, small business. And thank you.
General Cook, thank you. And now Governor Herbert.
Well, thank you, Doug. And in spite of that faulty dime toss, I'm happy to be here with you today. And,
I'll get a new dime.
Thanks to KSL for broadcasting this, and thanks to the League of Cities and Towns for hosting this today. As you know, I come from local government. I have an appreciation and understanding for where the rubber meets the road. I know who's doing the heavy lifting out there that's giving us some of the successes that we're finding in this state here today. I know there's still uncertainty in the marketplace. We're just coming through the worst economic time in our country's history, save the Great Depression. And there's still people out there that have uncertainty and are worried about what's taking place. But working with you, we have in fact turned this economy around. My job is to make sure we keep government off our backs and out of our wallets unnecessarily, to empower the private sector, And the results are that we are having an economy that's growing at twice the national average. Our unemployment rate when I came in was 8.3%. It's down to 6%. Our retail sales are up 11.2%. Our exports are up 41%. Our personal income is up 4.9%, the fifth best in the nation. We're clearly on a consistent road to recovery. Have we got challenges ahead of us? Certainly we do. We understand that we need to, in fact, make sure that we empower the private sector, create a business-friendly environment so that wealth can be created and then jobs can be created. That's what we've done here in Utah. That's why we're considered the best place in America now to do business. Leadership is about results. I've got a proven track record of success, of economic growth, and of optimism as we look forward to the future. It's going to take us all working together and pulling together. When I was first inaugurated, I talked about unprecedented partnerships. We're working better together than any time in our history, re-emphasizing education, doing things we need to raise the bar to have a great quality of life. I thank you for support and look forward to the discussion here today.
Thank you for your opening statements. And now we'll get into the question period, and we will have several representatives from our cities and towns who will be asking questions mixed in with this today. I'll remind our audience, both on radio and here at the Sheraton, and our candidates, that we will flip-flop back and forth, flip-flop being in a very good sense politically today, and we will have 60-second responses and then a 30-second rebuttal, and then it will go the other way next time. So let's start with this one. We keep hearing how important and how much of the future of Utah rests on us being able to develop business. I want to make this one specific. Many people in our state, and many of these folks out here in our municipalities, in our towns, in our counties, feel that Utah's alcohol policy can be a contributing factor to stalling growth, or even inhibiting it, or restricting it. Many people feel that our restrictions in general, the number of licenses that are available, and even something as nebulous as the perceptions of Utah and our Utah liquor laws are limiting business and growth. Let's start on this one with Governor Herbert. Your thoughts on where Utah needs to go with our alcohol policies?
Well, I think Utah over time has served very well as being a controlled state. There's about 17 states in America that are controlled states, but we've made some adjustments over the past number of years. The biggest concern I think we all have is oversight of the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission and what they do out there. We made some corrective action there to make sure we have more oversight and, in fact, embedded auditors to make sure that we are following protocol and procedures out there. But it generates about $90 million that goes into our coffers for education and other government services. It's been a profit center for the state. The challenge we have, and some of the common sense changes we made, is to make sure that we have enough licenses, particularly for those who have restaurants. As our state continues to grow, not only population of those who live here, but our tourism and travel trade is growing in significant ways. Our restaurants need to be able to have and serve alcohol. I've not only talked about it, but I've actually called the legislature back in a special session to make sure we had additional 90 liquor licenses for our restaurants. That's the kind of common sense approach we'll take as we go forward.
General Cook.
Yes, I think we've had a continual problem on how the Department of Alcohol and Beverage Control has been run. I think you've seen the many audits, and we still have more coming out that keep showing that if we're going to be, and which I agree, to have a business within government, we got to run it like a business. I think that we can increase the license, but at the same time as you increase those licenses, we need to also have the same supervision and have those who can protect and watch after the those who take licenses. The important thing is that it is an economic base, and for some of you in your local towns, that is a huge economic base. And we need to be able to have a state that can grow and to be able to manage this correctly. But first, we've got to get the Department of Alcohol and Beverage Control to run like a business. That would be one of the first things I would do as governor, is to really get that functioning so that it does even increase more money for the city and help you and your local communities.
Governor, your 30 seconds.
Well, some of the challenges and problems we've had out in the alcohol beverage control arena did not start on my watch. I've inherited some internal problems, but I'm here to tell you they're stopping on my watch. I'm the one that called for the audit in the first place, to see what we could do to find out where the challenges are. Audits are designed to give you a review and find where we have weaknesses so we can make improvement. That's what's taking place now, and the legislature agrees. Running it like a business is not quite the same thing, though. We are an alcohol control state, but we certainly want to optimize our ability to make alcohol available without promoting alcohol consumption and make sure that our restaurants have licenses necessary to meet the market demands.
I want to give one of our local representatives just a little heads up. I will come to their question next. Let's talk for just a moment about the gas tax here in the state of Utah. We've all been reading the stories. I know Governor Walker even looked into this several years ago about how we should restructure our Utah taxing system in general. The gas tax was something that was brought up even then. Because of efficiency, because of our mass transit, because of the tough economic times, all of this and more has led to lower revenue that is coming in, while certainly the need and the wear and tear on our infrastructure, on our roads, on our bridges is not diminishing. There are many things that are under consideration right now, or at least have been thrown around in the press and in some of the committees that have met. What is your vision for the gas tax specifically? And this time we start with General Cook.
Well, I think, and I want to say that I'm so excited as I looked at your resolution number 4, which talked about a way of looking at all the revenues that we have faced in front of our state. Not just gas tax, but all of them, and how we as a team can look at the future. I mean, we have bonded. We've, right now we're 87% leveraged out on our bonding capacity as a state. Now, as a business person, that's kind of like maxed out your credit card. We have some great need, I think, now to look at, look what happened in Santa Clara and other areas. We need to start looking at how we maintain these roads. We need to relook at the whole tax structure. I thought that your resolution number 4 hit it right on the point. All taxes need to be looked at. We need to find a way to formulate, as you say, a strategy to create long-term sensibility in local government. That starts with the sales tax and every other tax. And in my program called Utah One, we will get together in my first few weeks in our administration and start to look at all those capabilities of how we can handle not only sales tax, but property tax and everything else, and work with the gas tax too to make it a long-term program, because we cannot continue the earmarks.
Governor Herbert, and we'll give you a little extra time.
Well, let me just say, first of all, now is not the time for a tax increase of any form. We're just coming out of a difficult economic time. What we don't want to do is put some kind of a dampening effect on the economic recovery which is taking hold here in Utah. We want to continue to accelerate, so now is not the time for a tax increase. Secondly, I've worked with many of you, even back when I was a county commissioner, on what can we do, in fact, to improve the revenue stream for funding of roads. The best way we can do it is by growing the economy, which produces additional revenues as we have an expanding economy that raises all boats on the pond, maybe all cars on the road. That being said, I do believe, as we held when I was Lieutenant Governor a Transportation Summit, a need for further review of our ability to fund in a balanced approach, meaning that we have general fund monies that we utilize, as well as user tax, whether it be a gasoline tax or a sales tax. The discussion, should that excise tax be improved? Should it be earmarked? Should it be a sales tax? I think that's a healthy discussion we ought to have as we go forward. Again, I understand how important roads and transportation are. I know what the challenges is for you. I know where we've talked about increasing the gasoline tax, and the states said, we'll take the increase and leave the local communities out of it. I certainly don't support that. If we have any kind of increase in taxation down the road, that should be shared proportionally, as we are doing currently, as you get 30% of the gasoline tax now.
General Cook.
Well, I agree with the governor that you can't increase taxes, but I do think that it's time for us all to get together and find a way in this new economic recovery on how we are going to help our local cities and towns. And that discussion continues to get kicked. The can gets kicked down the road. And we have to find other ways to get revenue. You just can't say, when I just gave you those statistics, that we have to wait till the economy gets better. We first got to get a handle on where we are, some strategic plan on how we're going to move forward as a state.
If I might follow up on that just very quickly and give each of you maybe a 30-second response. Several things are being kicked around, and I'm curious if you lean toward one or another, realizing that this very well may be in the future, that it may be a combination of whatever, but some of the things under consideration would be toll roads, property tax increases, increase in the overall gasoline tax, which has not gone up in some time, or perhaps a hybrid of a fixed tax and then a percentage that would be a sales tax. Is there any particular thing that does appeal to you as you look at this issue moving forward? And Governor, let's start with you.
Well, again, I've already stated my position. Right now is not the time for a tax increase. If we're going to have good tax policy when it comes to funding roads, though, clearly what we are doing and how we have right now with the gasoline tax at 24.5 cents has not kept up with inflation. And as we have more better automobiles with better miles per gallon, we have more vehicle miles traveled, generating less proportionate revenue. That's a formula for failure long term. We need to find a balanced approach. I like the fact that we maybe have some adjustments made so that we adjust for inflation, so the excise tax, at least we don't lose in erosion to inflation. I think that's probably a good way. But there's other revenue streams out there that we can also do, and it comes out of the general fund, what we don't have out of the gasoline and fuel taxes. And again, the key is grow the economy, which expands the economic pie, which produces more revenue.
General Cook.
I think your question is right on point. I think we have to look at all of those, but doesn't come from the governor down. It comes from each one of us looking at our sources of money, our uses, and how we as a state, let's put away parties, let's put away any of that. Let's look at Utah, Utah #1. That's my concept. And we need to sit down and have a budgetary process that's open. And that we, like I've done in the military and in my own business, then let's come as a state and each city knowing our future, facing those brutal facts. And I think if we review all of those and establish a tax concept for the future and get your support, then I think we just have to move in that kind of direction.
As we were talking about putting together the format for this debate, we all agreed that we wanted to hear the voices from those who lead our communities from throughout the state of Utah. And I'm very pleased that Mayor Mike Caldwell would join us today from Ogden City, our newly elected mayor up there. And Mike, what's your question for these gubernatorial candidates?
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. And thank you, Governor Herbert and General Cook, for allowing me to be here. Ogden City, when you both opened with economic issues. And in Ogden, we've had great success in the last decade at attracting outdoor recreation-based companies and outdoor recreation-based tourism to our community. A big part of that is the trails that we have, the rivers that we have that come through that unique community. It's resonated in a really unique way. Last year we had over 90,000 people come to participate in events that were based around our outdoor recreation and trails. We do have some issues, though, around trails. As we look to expand in an urban environment like that, you do occasionally have pinch points where the public and private interests come together, and I'm curious how you might address that. We've heard of a lot of different ways to do that in the past, to expand our trails, Bonneville Shoreline being one of those key connectors. Those trails can act as threads that tie our communities together, but there are occasionally private and public interests that come together. I'd like to hear your ideas on how we can work effectively to continue to expand that, but to also recognize the interests of private property owners.
Thank you, Mayor, and this time we'll go with General Cook first.
First of all, I want to tell you what a great job you've done and in Ogden. I just was there the other day and just keep on loving that central community that you've got. I think the trails have to be continually pushed forward. I think that when you get to a certain point where you can't move forward, you can have the power. The city should have the power of eminent domain and move forward, because that creates the beauty of a fantastic community, and that's what we need. And you took a risk. You took a risk. You vested in your community, and you know how to lead your community. And the state shouldn't stop it. We should support you. And I want to take my hat off to you. Good job. Thanks.
Governor Herbert.
Trails are an important part of the quality of life that we have here in Utah. And particularly as we grow and have more congestion, I view trails as kind of long, skinny parks. I've worked with our Quality Growth Commission. I've been the vice chairman of the Envision Utah. When I was a county commissioner, we in Utah County had an extensive program for expanding our trail system, which is they're working very well today and to the benefit of the public. The challenge is, as you've alluded to, Mayor, is when it comes time to connect those trails, those parts, if we got some property owner that gets in the way. The question is going to ultimately be, do we have the right to have eminent domain and condemn for the public good? We do it for roads. We do it for libraries and other situations which are codified. Trails happen to be excluded. We had a bill that didn't gain any traction this past legislative session. I think it's something that ought to be revisited. I would caution everybody, eminent domain and condemnation ought to be the last resort. We ought to see if we can negotiate. In 14 years as a county commissioner, we only used it once on my watch. But that's something that we ought to consider for the public good, these long, skinny parks we call trails, which are, I think, a necessity for our quality of life.
General, your response.
I disagree that I agree that local communities can make all those determinations, and you need to have again, what you hear consistently from me, when you have a plan and you present it like you've done, and you can show where you're going to connect and where that can be an incentive to bring new business and vitality to our city, then you move forward, and we'll support you on that. I think that's what you got to do. And at last resort, obviously, is eminent domain. But if you have a plan and a concept, and you're pushing with an objective, you may not even have to use that. But good job again in Ogden. Thank you.
Whether it's at the federal level or if it's at the state level, anyone who's paying attention to any of the political advertisements or political conversations has certainly heard Hill Air Force Base come up. And when I think of our communities, our neighbors, our towns and cities in northern Utah, Hill Air Force Base is absolutely critical to not only the state's economy, but certainly so very, very directly to theirs. As we look at the future of Hill Air Force Base, as we look at how critical it is to the state of Utah and to our cities and towns, what are your visions of Hill Air Force Base, where it's going to go, what are the challenges, and as governor of the state of Utah, what would each of you do to preserve this amazing asset in our state? And Governor Herbert, we'll start with you first.
Well, Hill Air Force Base has certainly been one of the great jewels in our state, and again, we're a very patriotic state, and we support our military, and we are blessed to have Hill Air Force Base in our backyard. It employs a lot of people as an economic engine. We appreciate that. We understand that others around the country need to understand the benefit of Hill Air Force Base to them. Hill Air Force Base will remain viable and always will be open because it's the best air testing training range that we have in the continental 48 states. It's in the best interest of national defense to have Hill Air Force Base stay open. It's in the best interest of the Air Force to have Hill Air Force Base stay open. And just as importantly, maybe more importantly, it's in the best interest of the taxpayer to keep Hill Air Force Base open. With the F-16s or F-35, we now have Falcon Hill and private development and monies are going in there. I think we're in fact stabilizing the success story which we call Hill Air Force Base. It's going to be a collaborative effort. We have the Defense Fund. We put together $500,000 to make sure that the message of Hill Air Force Base gets out there so it will stand on its own merits, which is how it ought to be done.
General Cook.
Well, I'll tell you right now, when I was listening to the earlier campaigns and they talked about where Hill Air Force Base will be, I called the commands, and we are in trouble at Hill. The BRAC will be 2015. Tinker Air Force Base has already made a move with their state of Oklahoma and Oklahoma City and County, and they've already taken our position from a 1-star command, and they've taken it to Tinker for a 3-star command. We were asleep. We lost that first concept, and a big part of that, there's 2 missions there. One mission is obviously using our great target range. The other is a maintenance mission. That mission is in jeopardy, And as governor, I will go to work immediately. I have some ideas and concepts how we can bring that back. But Tinker, Oklahoma City, beat us on the first phase of BRAC. And that's going to be a huge loss to our state and to northern Utah. And I would love to start working immediately. I got some great ideas on how we can change some of that direction at Hill Air Force Base.
Governor Herbert, your 30 seconds.
Well, I have a little different point of view, of course, than Peter Cook. I've talked to General Bush about the situation out there before he mustered out, but we weren't outthought. Again, in efficiencies, as we need to find them in government, particularly a government that's bloated like it is today, and we need to find ways to save the taxpayers' dollars. You know, there's efficiencies that can be found and streamlined. At Oklahoma, which is a Republican state, this has nothing to do with politics. This has to do with the ability for us to make sure that those who make the decision understand what a great treasure and what an efficient base Hill Air Force Base is. It's going to be with us because it will stand on its merits and not fall some kind of political favoritism.
I'd like to mention to Councilman Don Olson from Ephraim that we'll take your question next, but I wanted to follow up. Since we are talking about Hill Air Force Base, and this is where the federal government and the military comes in big time, of course, in decisions and the future of that great base, let's talk about our federal lands for just a moment. And we may have to carve this into several different questions, but in general right now, the relationship with the state of Utah and the federal government, when there are so many elements of our state that are so critical financially, as far as military, tourism and so on, but yet there is such a frustration in the state of Utah over the control of vast, vast areas of federal land and the perception, if not the reality in the state, that in some cases we don't have enough say there. Let's talk about the relationship in general. We may get into some of the specifics as well, but how do you see the relationship of Utah with the federal government right now? And we'll start with General Cook on this one.
Well, I think that going after the federal government and going after our lands, again, I have one common theme. You need to have a plan and a program. And I have asked over and over again, what is the plan? I think just to me, I give the analogy of taking some of my units or in a small business where you've got to have a plan or a program. You can't just go out and sue people or sue our federal government. So I am very concerned. It's a good idea that we could probably get some more land and get a better tax base. But you got to have a plan. How are we going to do it? How are we going to, you know, it should be presented. And as a governor, listen, Governor Matheson started the Sagebrush Rebellion, and I think we need to relook at it, have a plan, have a game plan, and then move forward with trying to find a way that we can make this without trying to do a lawsuit that even the state legislature has said it's unconstitutional. But not to give up on the idea and come with a plan, and that's how I would work with you cities and towns so that we could have a strategic marketing plan on how we'd move forward.
Governor Herbert.
Well, we have a plan, and we have had plans. We've done resource management plans that many of you have been a part of. We have 7 of them around the state. We spend 6 to 8 years putting them together as far as how we will come together, allowing all stakeholders to say, this is how we'll develop our public lands. And then the Obama administration comes in and willy-nilly just pulls the rug out from underneath us and says, start over. We find that's not an effective way to optimize the management of the public lands. We clearly have 3 arrows in the quiver we've tried to use, and we've been doing this for many, many years. We negotiate when we can, we legislate where we are able to, and we will litigate as we are forced to. The House Bill 148 we've passed today is designed for us to have another opportunity to negotiate first. There's nothing in the bill that says we're going to sue. There's no willy-nilly lawsuit out there. It's designed for us to have the state to have more input in how we manage the public lands, more local input, more input from you, for the cities and the counties and the state, so that we can optimize the management of our public lands. There's not anything out there the federal government does better than the state or the local communities when it comes to management. We can do a better job, and that's all we're saying. Give us a chance.
General Cook.
Well, that's news to me, because I think that if we had a plan that would have everybody's buy-in, then this wouldn't be such a controversial issue. I mean, what do we do, for example, this year when we had to spend $50 million in fires. You know, I tell you, Governor, the concept has a point. And we have to be able to be sure we all understand that direction and where we're going with that direction. And as I go and travel through our communities, they agree we've got to find ways to be able to get a better tax base. But I don't see a plan. I haven't seen one. And most of the people I've even talked to, lawyers who are confused on really what the concept that we have here.
Because this is such a huge issue, I mentioned we might have to go a little deeper into this, and let's do that. Let's go back and forth for just a moment. Governor Herbert, you wanted a response.
Well, Peter brings up a great point, the fires. If we'd had better management of our rangelands and our forests, we would not have had as many fires, certainly not to the depth. For example, we can't even spray for the bark beetle in our forests. We've lost the lumber industry in Utah because of bark beetle coming in that the federal government will not let us spray for, which has killed the trees, which is just a stand of dead wood ready to be torched. We've had damage down in Iron County into New Harmony because we have to wait for Mother Nature to send a lightning strike for us to be able to take care of the underbrush that needs to be scarfed out because it's designated as wilderness. And man can't be in charge of being good stewards. That's crazy management. We have cheatgrass out there that is a fire hazard. It ought to be reseeded with more fire retardant grasses in a rangeland and have fire breaks put in it. Part of the problem we've had with fires is because of the lack of management by the federal government. We can do a better job of it. You can do a better job of it. You know your backyard better than anybody in Washington, D.C.
And General Cook, your response.
I don't disagree that you can manage your own grounds, and I don't disagree with all those concepts. But I do feel that there is not a program to where we have a problem with our own state parks. And to accept this program, this concept, without having a real understanding of what budget and what requirements it's going to take for us to make this a long-term game plan, I think is just not the way to go. I can understand all those issues. They cost money. And what the federal government does bring into our states and our cities, we have to be very careful about how we manage that. But on the same time, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that we need to move forward on this. But I just don't see a sound plan, and I don't see how we can accomplish it without a real understanding of where we're going.
Let's go now to Ephraim, Council Member Don Olson, who has a question for our candidates.
Yes. As a Utah farmer, nothing is more important to me than our reliable source of water. Currently, water users can file a change of application with the state engineer to change water rights from agriculture to municipalities. Personally, I'm a little nervous about giving all that authority to our state engineer to make that decision on his own based on the prior use of that water. So my question is, how will you protect both agricultural water rights along with our water rights of our cities and towns?
This time we go to Governor Herbert.
That's a great question. Water is really a significant issue that for many people has been kind of on the back burner. We've had a significant effort in Utah called Slow the Flow program to help us understand the need to conserve. We need to conserve what we have, but we need to develop what we need for future growth. The only limiting factor we have for growth in Utah, which is now the second or third fastest growing state in America, is water. And we're going to have the change from agricultural to M&I, and our municipalities need to be able to have that water available to accommodate the growth. I think we've done a pretty good job of managing resources in a very arid climate. When our pioneer ancestors came here, there was not a lot here. They learned how to, in fact, harness the snow melt, create reservoirs, irrigation canals, ditches, and made the desert blossom as a rose. That being said, we certainly need to make sure as we go forward that agriculture is protected. We ought to be able to, in fact, ensure that our own foods can be grown here for self-sufficiency needs, and that those water rights are protected. The water engineer in the Department of Natural Resources is a man designed to be insulated from politics. So based on the law, and that's part of the challenge, is getting the right law in place, making sure that everybody's water rights are protected. I think we've done a pretty good job in that overall.
General Cook.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, there's nothing more important than the water and preservation of it. And of course, not only water, but also farmland, and protect farmland. I do think that the state engineer needs more discretion. I think they need to have an office with more money and capability of meeting the future needs, so as cities pass through a lot of their concerns, it doesn't get stopped. I'm very concerned about the agricultural community. That's why I fought hard and still do on the Snake Valley. I think that's a prime example where we need to stand tall. The governor hasn't. We have to be able to be sure we protect Utah water and protect it today and protect every ounce we can really save. And I think that's one of the big, strong possibilities about good and strong leadership.
Governor.
Well, we have stood tall, very tall. We have drawn a line in the sand saying we'll protect every molecule of H2O that's Utah's water. We have a Democrat senator in Nevada that's trying to build a pipeline and got special legislation to allow him to take it through BLM land to put a straw into the Snake Valley area and suck water down to Clark County and Las Vegas. We're the ones that have stopped that from happening over the overtures of a Democrat-led proposition. We understand the importance of preserving our water. We're not going to give up and have not given up any of our water to anybody. We have limited resources. We have the ability to develop some more, getting water out of the Colorado River, Bear River Basin, other opportunities there, but we will stand tall and have stood tall on protecting our water rights here in Utah.
Let's talk for just a moment about this wildfire season that we have had in the state of Utah. There are many ramifications associated with that, including the costs of fighting those fires, but also let's go back to what has caused some of the fires. Not all, certainly, not even the bigger percentage, but some have been shooting sports related, some have been fireworks related, and I know as we went through this in talking with yourself, Governor, in talking with the State Fire Marshal, some of our municipalities, there seemed to be, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but wondering where the authority ultimately ought to be and who ought to make, perhaps even in a state of emergency, a decision that would pretty much blanket the state of Utah. Do we have that authority? Should we have that authority when we have the tinder dry environment that we had, the drought situation we had, liberalized fireworks law, and a very enthusiastic shooting sports community in the state of Utah? This time we do start with Peter Cook.
Yes. As you know, controversially, I came out as maybe my experience as a general and saw that all the key indicators were to me that this year that we had to really make a point of banning fireworks. And I think because of the reason I did that is because there was a real unclear understanding of where cities and towns and where the jurisdictions could be. And fires have no boundaries. Please not misinterpret that I think the state should take any control on that issue. I think what we have learned from this fire season that we need to have a clear, new legislation, new understanding how you take charge during these times, and not to have the confusion we've had this last fire season, because it's going to happen more and more. And I know even today we're concerned about where the fires continually could go as the season moves on, as a dry season.
Governor.
Well, this is an example of probably the differences between me and Peter. We have maybe one, maybe two fires started by fireworks. I understand that there's an opportunity for us to talk about local control. People say, oh, we believe in local control. But I've proven I believe in it by the stance I took. I understood that local people knew better what was the demographics in their own backyard and how to deal with this issue. Rather than, and with all due respect to General Cook, let's charge San Juan Hill, let's declare martial law, and let's ready, fire, and aim without understanding what's taking place out there and taking away from you the responsibilities you've been elected to have. Again, if we believe in local control, we need to let the local people make those decisions. The local sheriffs on where it should be open or closed for a shooting, or where we're going to have fireworks. You as mayors in the cities, as we had a significant fire season, gathered together and your own unique demographics came up with solutions in your cities. And we didn't have any fires started by fireworks. You guys did a great job, and that's the way it should happen. It should be bottom up, give you the responsibility that you've been elected to do, and not have some micromanagement from the Godfather on top to come in and tell you how to do it.
General Cook, your response.
I think you misunderstood what I said. And I think to say that any general would discharge a hill is incorrectly. What I said, and what I've been saying all along, I said this and I'll say it again. You know, you've got to have some plans. And I don't see, and I think one of the most confusing parts about where we are right now is I don't think that really the governor and the government and the state government is really functioning correctly to understand the needs of the local community. All I said, that there was a misunderstanding, and this should have been cleared. You've been around for a long time, Governor. This haven't happened. You should have seen the future, that there were problems in state and local governments and jurisdictions and how it could be held. And you were fortunate we didn't have any fire. And I know as a general you have to make decisions, you have to be decisive, and sometimes they're not popular. I'm no way, in any way, saying you should take it away from city and towns, and I think that was a misrepresentation of the facts. I was just pointing out leadership, and that there is a problem that needs to be solved, so the next year's season, you can have the complete power to do what you have to do.
Governor, in fairness, let me give you a little more time if you'd care to
Excuse
take
me?
it. To keep it fair, a little more time if you would care.
Well, again, he's the one that came in and said, you know, we need to just make a declaration statewide, ban fireworks in spite of violation of existing law, by the way, and take away from you the responsibility. So, you know, you can spin it however you want now, but the truth of the matter was you were the one that was pointing the finger saying we should have declared, you know, a statewide ban on fireworks after maybe 1 or 2 episodes. I mean, that's a knee-jerk overreaction. These guys have been elected to make the decisions themselves, and under the law they're allowed to do that, and they did a great job.
Let's take another question from one of our local folks, and this time we turn to the Layton City Attorney, Gary Crane, who has a question for our gubernatorial candidates. Gary?
Thank you very much. I applaud what I've just heard regarding local control. I think all of us here with the cities are concerned always, not only on a federal level to the state, but to the state, to local government, the attempt sometimes to take over control of issues that ought to be local issues. One of those issues is land use. And land use in the state of Utah has always been a local issue. But every once in a while, you'll have some type of use that will find it more convenient to come up to the Hill and accomplish a change than it would be to work through the local officials. One of those particular uses is the billboard industry. And for years and years, you're probably aware, and I'm certain Governor Herbert is having dealt with it on a local level. But we've been up here with the billboard industry, negotiating back and forth over the years, but it has always become a political issue. It's a land use issue that has become a political issue. And I guess what I'm looking for is, what are the boundaries that both of you have in your mind concerning what are local issues when it comes to land use and what are not, and specifically addressing perhaps the billboard issue and the conflicts there?
Governor.
Well, I've already demonstrated that I not only talk about local control, but when it came time to make decisions, I allowed local control to take place. The conflict we have with the billboard issue is a conflict of local control with zoning, which is in fact not only your responsibility, but it in fact has been taken all the way to the Supreme Court in times past to say you have the right to control the use of land through the zoning ordinances. And you juxtapose that against private property rights, and people have a private property right and an ability to have this property to display and advertise through a billboard system. Again, those are hard issues. I expect, though, that the local jurisdiction will in fact prevail. I think it should. Private property rights, I think, are sacrosanct. It's the foundation for freedom. It's the foundation for commerce. And you as local leaders need to understand that principle. And we need to make sure that whenever we have a private property right here with entity A, that we don't treat entity B any differently. But I believe you have under the law the right to have local jurisdiction on zoning, but you ought to make sure you protect and treat everybody equally when it comes to their private property right.
General Cook.
Well, here again is, I hope I'm being consistent. I think the cities and towns should control billboards, period.
Governor Herbert, do you care to respond?
I think he said it all.
All right. We would be remiss, and we've tried to focus many of our questions on things that very, very directly and specifically affect our cities and our towns, but would be remiss if in this opportunity, especially with it being broadcast all over the state of Utah, to not ask a significant question about education. And I'd like to make it a little general because each one of the communities has a different priority. Each one of the communities loves their children. Each one has a differing structure and a way that they prefer to go through their school boards and their local entities to educate their children. But as far as being the leader of this great state forward, Governor, assuming you are reelected and continue as governor, Mr. Cook, assuming you are elected governor, what would you want your legacy when it comes to education to be in this state? And we'll start with General Cook on this.
My legacy would be is that I had enough guts, enough ability to be able to solve the problem we have with education. Again, we sit here today and just say things are all great, but that issue's been pushed from one administration to the next governor, and there's no solid solution. And, you know, we just can't keep kicking this, can down the road. You cannot have an economic development plan and face this global economy with a bad education program. And we have that. So my job would be, as the first priority, is to find out why we can't fund this education programs and make it as a priority. And that, again, I'll tell you, I want to make it very clear that my budget process, you will be a part of. I will come down to your communities and open it up. You won't see any voodoo economics as the legislature. We're all sitting here talking about state control. My government, the governor's office, will be transparent, and you will see how we will solve these problems together.
Governor Herbert.
Well, I agree with General Cook that...
He's another good general. It's both from Utah State, too.
Let me start over. I agree that education is key for our long-term sustained economic development. In fact, I'm the one that's come in and created for the first time a Let's Get Something Done Commission. We've had studies done in the past, and we've reviewed it, and we've talked about it, and then we haven't done as much as we could. So I brought stakeholders together, 25, it's up to about 32 now, different points of view, from the UEA on the one side, to the pro-voucher crowd, with the Parents for Choice in Education, superintendents, principals, business leaders, legislators, with the idea of let's see what we can do to raise the educational achievement in this state. And let's quit fighting about it and start pulling together. We all know Utah has a unique situation. We have 20% more kids in our households. We have the highest birth rate in the nation. We have a unique challenge with the public lands that stifles our ability to fund education. But let's see what we can do and optimize our ability working together. At first, people had a hard time sitting by each other. But eventually, we've passed 16 different resolutions out of that Education Commission. All unanimously, which is quite remarkable in itself. 15 of those have been passed by our state legislature. We're doing a lot better when it comes to funding education. We funded $200 million of additional new money to add to the $3.3 billion we're already putting into education this past legislative session. That's why I've got the endorsement of the Utah Education Association. Somewhat unusual sometimes for a Republican, because we're doing great stuff when it comes to advancing the educational system in the state of Utah.
General Cook, your rebuttal, and we'll give you a little extra time.
I think, Governor, you've had a long time to be able to solve the problem of education. It's time for somebody to take over and run it right and make it happen. Okay. That is where I feel.
I have, I think, so we have plenty of time for the final statements. And I'm going to, I've saved probably the toughest question and the most timely question for last. And I'm just going to give each of you 15 seconds on this. Who are you rooting for tomorrow? And let's start with Governor Herbert on this one first.
Well, I will not equivocate on this issue. My son-in-law is the wide receiver coach at Brigham Young University, and I attended school there. My son-in-law was an All-American. My brother was an all-WAC performer. My daughter-in-law was a valedictorian at the University of Utah. My son is there going to engineering school after having graduated as a meteorologist. And I'm here to tell you it's going to be a great game Saturday.
General Cook.
I had my win last week. I'm an Aggie.
We all have to applaud that answer. Okay. Now it's time for our final statements, and because of the coin toss, Governor Herbert, you will go first. And let's go 90 seconds on this, if we could.
Well, thank you, Doug, and thanks to the League again, and thanks for all of you participating here today. My hero, Ronald Reagan, said that the most scary words in the English language were, "I'm from the government, and I'm here to help." I think you see a contrast in our approaches. I think we agree on some of the challenges and the problems. We just disagree on the process. Peter Cook's process is we've got to have a plan to have a plan. We're going to have more government program. We have to have some kind of government expansion. Every problem we have has a government solution, a government program. I hesitate to recommend you go to my opponent's webpage, but go and read, and you'll see the government program is all about the solutions to the problem. Ronald Reagan said government is not the solution, it many times is the problem. Now, all of us here, we appreciate government. We're not anti-government, but we believe that it ought to be limited in our lives, that it not be intrusive, and that we ought to foster private property expansion, that private property rights are the basis for our freedoms and commerce. We need to empower the private sector to create economic expansion. We've worked very hard in my administration to get government off your backs and out of your wallets. Why would we want to follow the pathway we see in Washington, D.C. of government expansion where they're spending 40 cents out of every dollar? We're one of only 8 states. Let me announce here today, this is a hot news flash. We just got word from Wall Street that Utah's just been given a AAA bond rating again from all 3 rating agencies, only one of 8 states in America to have that. Not even America has got that. We've put ourselves on a road to prosperity. We've got a ways to go, but we're on the right road. We're consistently getting better economically. In every measurable way, we're doing better. We're leading the nation. We are like cream rising to the top. As the Wall Street Journal said, we're the gold standard. We are the brightest star on the flag. With your support and our continued efforts, we'll make sure that Utah continues to lead the nation as the best place to live, the best place to raise a family, and the best place to do business.
General Cook.
Governor, I think you got me confused with somebody else, because I'm a small business person. I fought for this country. I am not in any way trying to bring more government. That's the opposite concept. Please don't use the same labels and try to split this concept into a person that wants big government. I don't. I want it back to local government. I want the processes. I want transparency. I want openness. I gave you the facts, Governor. I think it's horrible for you to sit here and think that we, and lead this state, that we're on a stage of economic recovery when I've given you the facts. We have lost jobs. We need to come up with a new economic game plan. I can read right from here, right from your game plan. It says here, low taxes and cheap labor and an educated workforce. You're selling our state to have cheap labor. We have no education to back our state up with as we meet this globalized economy. And we have lost Hill Air Force Base because somebody was at the switch. And that's the truth. And we've got to have leadership, not salesmanship. We've got to have the ability not to take this kind of fact today to think that I'm here to take away the power from local government. I've been a commander and a small business person, and I've always stood up for the local person, and that's how business works. 29 years in the private sector. I have not been in government for 24 years plus. I made a payroll. I know what you all have to fight. And we need that kind of person in that office today. And that's what needs to happen. Getting those people with that kind of experience, and that's what I represent. And I'm ready to fight and be your governor and not sell, but lead.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. Governor Gary Herbert, General Peter Cook, thank you so very, very much. We need to wrap up this segment for our radio broadcast. Our thanks to the Utah League of Cities and Towns, to our friends at Zions Bank for facilitating this, and thank you again so much for listening to this great debate.